Lida tried to hug everyone at once, her entire group of ballroom dancers. In just a minute, they would step onto the stage as participants in the City Talent Festival, and this was their debut. Lida understood perfectly how nervous they were. She had been like that herself, and still was, though the focus had shifted. Once, Lida danced herself, but now her wards, the senior group at the ballroom dance studio, would perform. Lida's mother had brought her to the studio, as promised, right after her 5th birthday. Yesterday, Lida and her friends had managed to blow out 5 beautiful candles on a delicious cake, and the next morning they went to sign up for ballroom dancing. They were lucky. Although classes had already been going on for 2 weeks and pairs had been formed, a boy named Lev, 6 months younger than Lida, joined at the same time. That's how the pair, Lev and Lida, was born, and they remained a pair, soon becoming one of the best, for 4 years until Lev moved to another country with his parents. Finding a permanent partner after that didn't work out. It was generally difficult. There weren't enough boys in the ballroom dance studio. So Lida stayed without a pair but didn't leave the studio. She learned new dances along with everyone else and filled in as a substitute if a girl in some pair got sick. But a permanent spot? No, that didn't happen. Then Anna Alexandrovna made Lida her assistant, assigning her to work on movements with those who weren't getting it. Sometimes Lida led individual elements of rehearsals herself, while Anna Alexandrovna just watched. And one day she said, "You could already lead a group on your own. Think about it, Lida." And now Lida led 2 groups of ballroom dancers, one with younger school kids, the other with high schoolers. The senior group had a solid core that had formed long ago. They danced very well, and most importantly, pairs had come together. There were no forced singles. Today, at the festival, these pairs would show what they could do. But even though they were high schoolers, they were still kids at heart, asking her, "What prizes will there be? And will there be something sweet like for the little ones?" But chocolates, cakes, and pastries, Lida understood this, were limited for ballroom dancers to avoid energy crashes. And they understood it too, sticking to a no-sugar diet. But sometimes they desperately craved it. They all danced, applause still ringing out, and then a young man climbed onto the stage, followed by 2 guys carrying gifts. And that's when Lida was sure she wasn't mistaken. His posture and gait were those of someone who had danced. He said he had been entrusted to award this group, which had shown mastery, convinced the audience that the waltz is an eternal dance, and simply captivated everyone. As Lida and her young dancers were leaving the cultural palace, he called out to her. That same man. "Lida, excuse me, I don't know your patronymic. Can I have a minute?" She stopped. He introduced himself as Sergei Mikhailov, one of the sponsors of this festival. He wanted to get to know her better. Her wards had shown a very high level. He had an idea of the labor behind it, primarily hers. "Tell me, can I help your group in any other way?" That's how Sergei appeared in Lida's life. Sergei had grown up early. After 6th grade, during vacations, he sold newspapers and magazines on trains, back when mobile phones hadn't completely replaced them. He sold gum and candies by the piece, all day long. His mother, who was ill at the time, only asked her son to be home by evening. They lived very modestly after his father left. He didn't help them, but at least without him there was no yelling, insults, alcohol stench, or throwing things and dishes. For that, Sergei paid by having to leave the ballroom dance studio he loved so much, where he was considered one of the most promising. The studio was paid, and there was no money for it. But Sergei didn't blame his mother. He knew, he saw that she was ready to do anything for him, and he was ready too, not just to give up ballroom dancing, but to work around the clock as long as his mother recovered. But it didn't work out. His mother probably tried with all her might to hold on until her son came of age, so Sergei wouldn't end up in an orphanage. She made it, but passed away when Sergei was 19. By then, he already had his first trading stall near the bus station, with a simple assortment in demand, and the customers were simple too. Villagers returning from the market who could afford maybe a bottle of water and some sweets for the kids on the road. From that start grew a whole chain of grocery stores today, owned by Sergei Mikhailov. Now he had everything: a big house, a jeep, a decent sum in the bank, 2 new stores opening in a neighboring city. And all this, he, Sergei Mikhailov, no one could say his business was shady, that he rose on someone else's money. That was important to Sergei. But lately, he had to answer another question more often, phrased in different ways but with the same meaning. Was he a confirmed bachelor? Why still without a family? Sergei definitely wasn't a confirmed bachelor, but he couldn't force himself to marry just for the sake of marrying. As for charity, he did it not because it became fashionable, or to promote himself, or for tax breaks. Sergei remembered well from his own experience how not everyone lives normally. That's why he supported 2 orphanages and recently became a sponsor of a children's folk art festival. At the latest one, unexpectedly for himself, he saw Lida's dance group and immediately remembered how he himself danced on stage, then had to leave, forced to, because his mother was more important. Today, at the festival, the young ballroom dancers with their Viennese waltz took him back to his childhood, to his studio. Even if the other jury members hadn't given this group first place, Sergei Mikhailov would have noted them anyway and given prizes and gifts, but the jury was unanimous. Lida didn't learn all this right away, but there was something in this Sergei Mikhailovich that ruled out him being a rich, successful businessman playing the sponsor role while actually being indifferent to children and everything unrelated to multiplying his capital. Lida had no experience dealing with such masters of life, but she had heard that all their impulses, all their charity was just a pose, a PR stunt. In any case, Lida hadn't been acquainted with such people before, and here seemed to be an exception. And so it turned out. They had been meeting for almost a month. Both admitted it was their first serious relationship. They tried to name reasons, each their own, but it turned out the reason was the same. No one had hooked them before, but now they were hooked. They had caught each other, Lida and Sergei, and understood there was no point denying it. A second chance like this might not come. So they stopped avoiding or inventing reasons not to meet, and soon Sergei waited for Lida every day after work. Then he invited himself to watch her rehearse with her ballroom kids, and immediately said, "It's a shame I'm not in the age group you train anymore, but you know what I'd want? To dance with you in Paris, near the Eiffel Tower. I haven't forgotten how to lead a partner in the Viennese waltz, though it's been 100 years since I danced." Until the wedding, it was hard to find anyone in the city happier than them. True, they didn't look, they didn't compare. They spend all their free time together. They say they couldn't get enough, though Lida and Sergei were more the quiet types, but that was with others. Together, both became so talkative they could reminisce and tell each other about everything for hours. Before meeting Sergei, Lida couldn't even imagine she could be so happy, though her life hadn't had any knockdown tragedies. But happiness, it turns out, can also not knock you off your feet, but give you the ability to fly. She wanted to tell Sergei about it so many times, but he beat her to it. "Lida, from the outside, it probably looks like I'm flying. Well, I feel like I'm flying too, and it's all because of you, Rita." They had a beautiful wedding without pompous extravagance, a week in Paris, and there, near the Eiffel Tower, after they came down, Sergei invited Lida to a waltz. It was a bit strange to dance this waltz in jeans and sneakers right on the patch by the tower entrance to music that Sergei had set on his phone as the ringtone when Lida called. In a few seconds, Lida and Sergei were in the center of a circle formed by tourists. They watched them, then applauded, shouted something in different languages, but clearly compliments. That was evident from their faces. And that wasn't all. A girl, about 10, ran up and handed Lida a small bouquet. Lida still doesn't know what the flowers were called, but there was something French about them. Lida thanked the girl. When they returned home and planned for summer, then both would have longer vacations, and they'd definitely fly wherever they wanted. There was still time to choose the place. Meanwhile, Lida still worked at the studio and was grateful to Sergei. He hadn't even hinted that she should quit, though Lida knew that in the society they were supposed to frequent by status and position, not one wife worked. Lida didn't understand them. She tried to explain it by the fact that these wives, fixated on spas, cosmetic procedures, and boutiques, didn't have such a passion for work, didn't have a group of ballroom dancers like hers, didn't have such talented pupils in love with dance. 3 months remained until their first wedding anniversary, and it so happened that around this time, Lida learned her dancers would participate in a prestigious regional contest. Winning it meant a ticket to the Republican Festival. Lida knew her group could win, but they needed more rehearsals to eliminate all roughness, all small mistakes. So now, Lida spent a lot of time at the studio. Sergei understood and supported his wife. Lida hadn't forgotten that their anniversary was soon, and she wanted all subsequent anniversaries to be unforgettable for her and Sergei. Anniversary means a gift, and one that would show how much Lida loved her husband. But what to give Sergei when he had everything? And she had to choose it so her husband wouldn't see, otherwise what kind of surprise would it be? Amid these gift choices for Sergei, Lida didn't immediately notice or hear the whispers around her. The gossip that her husband had taken up with some mistress, they were seen together often, and she was a very young girl, stylish-looking, with a model's walk. In short, Sergei had found a replacement for Lida and wasn't shy about switching to almost schoolgirls. If only they knew who her parents were, tell them, let them watch their daughter better, hanging around a man old enough to be her father. But Lida couldn't believe this. Still, such talk sowed distrust, and lately Sergei had been staying late at work often, explaining his delays vaguely, dubiously. A partner was late for a meeting, or a contract was drawn up wrong, urgently needed to approve a new one. In short, he didn't have time to talk to her. Lida began to doubt Sergei but didn't insist, and resentment was already eating at her. In this, Lida was no different from women who don't yet have proof of their husband's infidelity but feel it exists. Then each acts in her own way. Some confront their spouse with facts and break off, some beg for the marriage to continue, some go all out thinking revenge is necessary. At such a moral crossroads, Lida found herself, right on the eve of the prestigious contest that required a lot of attention. After all, for some wards, it could be a ticket to life. She could no longer fully engage in rehearsals, felt guilty, tormented herself, and Sergei wouldn't leave her mind. How could she have been so wrong? Or was it true that you couldn't be that happy? She had been and thought it would always be so. Could there be anyone better than her and Sergei? Lida now asked her husband nothing. If he asked about something, she answered. And Sergei knew Lida was in such a moment and tried not to interfere, so at least that's what Sergei told someone on the phone. Lida overheard it accidentally. But let him say it. What she really felt, let it not concern him. And like most women in such a position, Lida began to build a plan of exposure and subsequent revenge, though even to herself she didn't call it that. She didn't name what was happening at all. They hadn't even lived a year together, but what about those who endure for years? She wouldn't endure, she'd do something, just do something. For now, she hadn't figured out what. Lida knew she could return to her parents, meaning she wouldn't be left without a roof over her head. She knew she'd pull herself together and her ballroom dance classes wouldn't be affected. But how to live on? How to order herself to cross Sergei out of her life, without whom she couldn't even breathe now? Only now she breathed and suffocated. Lida went over every day spent with Sergei before the wedding and the first months after. There hadn't been a hint from him that he could cheat on her, but even if so, if another woman appeared, why not tell her? It would hurt Lida, it would be bitter, but at least it would be honest, Lida thought. Thoughts jumped, wouldn't line up in a row, so in half-sleep another night passed after a rehearsal where Lida barely paid attention to how the group danced, shocking her wards because they'd never seen such a Lida. So after the rehearsal, Lida went home, but for now to the home where she lived with Sergei. But soon she'd move out, only first tell her parents everything, and they definitely wouldn't be happy, but they'd definitely be on her side. Lida walked with her head down and suddenly heard, "Lida!" A voice so familiar. She looked up, it was her ballroom dance teacher, Anna Alexandrovna. The voice was the same, posture unchanged, though years had left their mark on her face. But how glad Lida was to see her. Anna Alexandrovna noticed right away that something was wrong and invited her to the nearest cafe. Good that the hall was half empty, they sat at a far table and Anna Alexandrovna said, "Come on, spill it, Lida." For the first time, Lida spoke about how the fate of cheated wives had befallen her. Acquaintances were already gossiping about it, some sympathized but most gloated, you're no exception. And Lida had been sure everything with Sergei would be ideal, only love and trust. Now only the last step remained, how to cut this Gordian knot. Lida didn't want to make a scene or scandal, she didn't know how. Quietly leaving with a goodbye note wasn't an option either. Lida was choking on resentment, and she had to do something with it. Lida was ashamed that she'd taken everything Sergei said at face value. He'd given her so much happiness in that time. Turns out what was happening now was payment for happiness. You have to pay for it too, like everything? Then it's good that only she would pay. They had no children. By mutual agreement, they'd decided on a child in a year or two. "The most horrible thing," Lida said. But Anna Alexandrovna interrupted. "The most horrible is that there are talks around you, and someone pities you, Lida. That depresses you the most." And that, Lida admitted too. But probably most of all, that she still loved Sergei. She wanted to say more, but didn't have time. Through the window, Lida saw Sergei, and next to him, her best pupil, Vika. They walked, talking animatedly about something, then stopped right opposite the window. Sergei hugged Vika and led her somewhere. There was his car. Sergei opened the door for Vika and helped her in, then got in himself, and they drove off somewhere. Lida couldn't breathe. She could imagine anything, but not this. So Vika, the beauty, the smart one, the most talented in the group who kept all the ballroom boys at a distance, that's why she chose her, Sergei. And he didn't refuse a young mistress. Lida quickly said goodbye to Anna Alexandrovna, leaving her in complete bewilderment, and ran out of the cafe. How long Lida wandered the streets, she doesn't remember. Only when it got dark, when the streetlights came on, did Lida return home. And there, Sergei was already waiting for her. Probably his date with Vika went well, because as Sergei helped Lida take off her coat, he reminded her that the day after tomorrow was their wedding anniversary, the first one. Lida should choose an outfit. Sergei had already ordered photo and video shooting and a restaurant. What an actor her husband was. Not a muscle twitched on his face while he said all this, or rather, while he lied so masterfully to Lida. Fine, she'd play along with Sergei. She'd congratulate him on the first and last anniversary of their wedding, and congratulate him in a way he'd remember for sure, and let him not expect a gift. Now, there would be a gift, more like a surprise. She'd tell Sergei everything. But if he wanted Lida dressed and styled accordingly, she'd do it. The next morning, Lida went to a beauty salon, spent half the day there, but the result was stunning. Now a young, beautiful woman demonstrating her independence. Such a one could never be humiliated. That's what Lida aimed for, spending several hours. And then, as Survey asked, Lida arrived by taxi at the appointed time at the restaurant. At the entrance, Sergei was already waiting. How could he fake such admiration, whisper that he loved her? Fine, Lida would endure this too. She'd present her gift to her husband later, right in the hall. They entered the hall. Strange, Lida thought. By the stage, there was only one table, luxuriously set. The other tables were pushed to the walls, creating space in the center. And no one in the hall except Lida and Sergei. He pulled out a chair. Lida sat, mentally adjusting when to give her husband the gift. But then the Viennese waltz sounded, and her pupils came out. Where did they come from? And where did these chic costumes come from, which the kids didn't have? And how they danced. Lida even forgot why she'd come here, so captivated by the dance. On the last chords, they all surrounded their table. Golden hearts fell from above somewhere, then a huge basket of white roses descended. Sergei took the flowers, and someone handed him a microphone, and he said, "Today is exactly a year since I married this most beloved and dearest woman, and I still can't believe it's true, and my love for her grows stronger every day. And now, in front of you and your pupils, I want to ask, Lida, maybe we weren't wrong? I definitely wasn't, but I want to hear it from you. I know your wards want to hear it too. They helped me make this holiday for you. And the Viennese waltz you just saw was staged by your pupil Vika. She held secret rehearsals from you, and I think the kids did great." Now Lida knew what it meant to be doused with cold water. They'd just doused her. How to look at Sergei, at her kids, at Vika, whom she doubted so much. They surrounded their table and sang a song of their own composition, with words about how Lida was their favorite and best dance teacher, that they wanted to dance for her and her wonderful husband in 10 years and in half a century, a congratulatory dance, that all contest performances they dedicated to her. Who knew what was going on in Lida's soul? How can shame and joy be side by side? How can you want to fall through the earth and soar from happiness? When they got home, Lida didn't know how to justify to Sergei that she had no gift for him. She didn't know how to explain it, and felt like the most awful wife. How could she think that about Sergei and Vika? She knew her. No, Vika would never do that. And Sergei was already talking about what wonderful wards she had. He said he couldn't figure out how to celebrate their first anniversary. Vika helped. He ran into her and her mom by chance at a jewelry store. He wanted to choose a gift for Lida there, and said their first anniversary was soon, and he didn't know how to make it memorable. A gold piece? Everyone does that. But how could he show that Lida was special and extremely important to him? Then Vika and her mom suggested this variant with the Viennese waltz and decorating the hall, and he accepted right away. Vika told all the kids from the studio. They all agreed, and no one let it slip. Then Sergei decided that new concert outfits were needed for this occasion. They discussed them, everyone made corrections, and it turned out so beautiful. "Beautiful, yes, Lida, your kids are great," Sergei said and kissed his wife. And they changed the waltz a bit, you noticed? And they renamed it. Now it's the Dance of Happiness. And tomorrow, I think, they'll ask you to name this waltz just that when you submit the application. Will you agree? Sergei said, and tears flowed down Lida's cheeks. She hadn't decided yet whether to tell Sergei about the stupidity she'd carried for more than a day without parting, but she definitely knew what happiness is and how easy it is to lose it. But Lida would never lose her happiness, and Lida would never believe whispers and hints. They can so easily destroy everything. It's worth at least listening to them. They sow doubts, undermine faith in the one you love, who's dear to you. Words really have destructive power. They can be a weapon, sometimes irreversible. Lida now knew this. She'd gotten an expensive lesson for life.